Celtic Myths and Legends by T.W. Rolleston. Chapter 8. Myths and Tales of the Cymry. Geoffrey of Monmouth. Next we have Geoffrey of Monmouth, Bishop of Sir Asaph, who wrote his Historia Regum Britanniae in South Wales in the early part of the 12th century of the Common Era. This work is an audacious attempt to make a sober history out of a mass of mythological or legendary matter, mainly derived, if we are to believe the author, from an ancient book brought by his uncle Walter, Archdeacon of Oxford, from Brittany. The mention of Brittany in this connexion is, as we shall see, very significant. Geoffrey wrote expressly to commemorate the exploits of Arthur, who now appears as a king, son of Uther Pendragon, and of Egerna, wife of Gorlois, Duke of Cornwall, to whom Uther gained access in the shape of her husband through the magic arts of Merlin. He places the beginning of Arthur's reign in the year 505, recounts his wars against the Saxons, and say he ultimately conquered not only all Britain, but Ireland, Norway, Gaul, and Dacia, and successfully resisted a demand for tribute and homage from the Romans. He held his court at Caerleon on Usk. While he was away on the continent carrying out his struggle with Rome, his nephew Modred usurped his crown and wedded his wife, Gwan Humara. Arthur, on this, returned, and after defeating the traitor at Winchester, slew him in a last battle in Cornwall, where Arthur himself was sorely wounded. 542 of the Common Era. The queen retired to a convent in Caerleon. Before his death, Arthur conferred his kingdom on his kinsman, Constantine, and then was carried off mysteriously to the Isle of Avalon, to be cured, and the rest is silence. Arthur's magic sword, Caliburn, Welsh, Calad of Volch, is mentioned by Geoffrey and described as having been made in Avalon, a word which seems to imply some kind of fairyland, a land of the dead, and may be related to the Norse Valhall. It was not until latter times that Avalon became identified with an actual site in Bretagne, Glastonbury. In Geoffrey's narrative, there is nothing about the Holy Grail, or Lancelot, or the Round Table, and except for the allusion to Avalon, the mystical element of the Arthurian saga is absent. Like Nennius, Geoffrey finds a fantastical classical origin for the Bretons. His so-called history is perfectly worthless as a record of fact, but it has proved a veritable mine for poets and chroniclers, and has the distinction of having furnished the subject for the earliest English tragic drama, Gorboduc, as well as for Shakespeare's King Lear, and its author may be described as the father, at least on its quasi-historical side, of the Arthurian saga, which he made up partially of records of the historical Dux Bellorum of Nennius, and partially out of poetical amplifications of these records made in Brittany by the descendants of exiles from Wales, many of whom fled there at the very time when Arthur was waging his wars against the so-called heathen Saxons. Heathen, pagan, I absolutely hate using these words as hate speech. If we're talking about their houses, whatever. People on both sides. But Geoffrey's book had a wonderful success. It was speedily translated into French by Wace, who wrote Les Romans de Brut about 1155 of the Vulgar Era. We added details from Brenton's sources and translated from Wace's French into Anglo-Saxon by Layman, who then thus anticipated Malory's adaptations of late French prose romances. Except a few scholars who protested unavailingly, no one doubted its strict historical truth, and it had the important effect of giving to early British history a new dignity in the estimation of continental and of English princes. To sit upon the throne of Arthur was regarded in itself a glory by Plantagenet monarchs who had not a trace of Arthur's or of any British blood. And it's important to note that if we look at modern claims of history, the historicity of the chronicles even being made about modern wars, or, it takes us 20 years to figure out, for most people in a country to, hear commonly the actual numbers of people dying or the actual ways that things turned. There's such a spin on things. People in the, whether it's the dominant country or the other way around. So it seems that the secularization of history didn't do it any favors.